But you're a super generous guy. How does somebody go from, you know, having this motive? I think a lot of people have this motive of church is in my way and I just want to make money and be rich for myself. And you know, if anything gets in my way, I'm going to get rid of it and stuff like that. And some people can manage doing business, making money, and staying faithful to church and doing what God wants them to do. I think like people have a really hard time to being generous in that. So like, what would you kind of equate you being generous? Like, how did that start to happen in your life?
That's a really good question. What was the origin of generosity?
Yeah, because it's like, well, just serving God and living for Jesus. But it's like, yeah, that's the simple, you know, way of putting it. But then it's like you have to actually make enough to support yourself. Not all the time. Like it's more blessed to give. You don't have to have a lot to give, but you know, at some point you got to make sure you're being responsible. And because I've seen a lot of people, they give, and they're struggling.
Yeah.
And it's great that they give and they're awesome people. And I think God will have dividends in the end for them. But it's, you know, I think there's also a different way of doing it.
I mean, so as I'm thinking on the spot, there's probably 2 or 3 main things that come to my mind about why I feel like being very generous with money is important. Number one, I did not build my life off of being smart or capable or confident. Like I wasn't somebody who went and got a degree, knew I was smart, knew I could do all these things. I was a nobody who just tried really hard. And I believe God allowed me to keep that sense of myself. Like, you're a nobody. Like, the reason why you're here is not because you're somebody. It's because I allowed you to get here. And if you get your head too big, I always got the sense that, like, God would say, well, then I'll pull it back. Like, I'm not giving this to somebody who's going to be full of themselves and be selfish. And that was just a work that God did in my heart from the very beginning. Like, I don't like pretentiousness. I don't like flaunting what I have. That does not make me feel comfortable. And I do not think that people that have money are better than people that don't. I don't see poor and rich as smart and dumb. Some of the people that I know that are the best people, I mean the best people that I would say I could never be as good as that person is, they are such a good person. They have nothing financially. And some of the worst people I have ever met, who are the meanest, nastiest, most selfish human beings, are so rich and so successful. And so I never equated having success and money as to being a better person. I saw those as 2 totally separate things, and that can all align in different ways. And so, like, just remember, and I've always made sure that the people that I spend a tremendous amount of time with, I don't have a bunch of rich friends. I have a few that have a lot of money and things like that. But most of the people who I'm very close with are people that probably have, 1/20th of what I have. And so I think I just have kept my head on straight about what good people are and then what having money is. And they're very different things. But from a people perspective, there are definitely 2 people in my life that have shown me generosity, and that had a huge impact on me, and that was my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother, who's been gone for 2019, 10 years, so 20, 21, 22, 28, 14 years she's been dead. She died in her 80s, but she was very wealthy. She lived through the Great Depression. Her husband had a really good job. They invested well, and they had a tremendous amount of money. And they lived very moderate lives. My grandmother lived in a very simple home, drove 1 car. The entire time I knew her, she only had 1 car. And when she died, I realized she had millions of dollars, but never lived that way. She just didn't live that way. But when I was going back to the very beginning, when I bought my first house, I was working really hard at the pizza place, and I had 2 other part-time jobs. One was working for her, maintaining her property, and another one. And so I'm just killing myself to try to make enough money to put a little bit of money down for like a first-time home buyer program. It was only like maybe $8,000 or $10,000, but to me, $8,000 or $10,000 was like almost an insurmountable amount of money. How was I going to come up with that? And I remember working for her one day in the yard, and she said, you know, I was married at that time, and she said, you're looking for a house? And I told her, yeah. She said, well, how are you going to do that with the down payment? And I told her, like, I don't know. I'm trying to save. I'm a long way off. And she just asked me a question. Well, what do you think you would need? And I said, $8,000 to $10,000. And so a couple of weeks went by or whatever. And one day when I was finished up helping her, I was walking out the door. She just handed me an envelope and she said, this is for you.
Wow.
And she gave me $10,000.
Wow.
Yeah. And that had, what that allowed to happen in my life. Like I bought this house, which was a good investment. That investment turned into a pretty big profit when I sold it a few years later and was able to build my next house. And I saw how like that one act of generosity was a huge help in my life and really propelled me in many ways. And she helped me in many other ways too. And then my mother, not so much financially because my mother never had a tremendous amount of money, but my mom, even to this day, my mom's 80 years old. I call her a couple times a week. And the thing she's spending time with is her neighbor, Dolores, has cancer and is in her same age frame and doesn't have a husband, doesn't have kids. And she just spends all day taking care of her, doing her weeding, doing her shopping, taking her to doctor's appointments. And that was my mom my whole life. Like my mom, wherever she could help people, she helped people. And I just saw a tremendous amount of I had respect for people who were generous and kind. And I hate bullies. I hate them with a passion. I do not like people who push people around. But I like people who are kind to people who need help. And there's just something about that in my personality, I think, baked in that I really like when people like reach out and help someone who has a need. I guess because I remember back to those days, like not having a lot. Another example in that time frame was like after my first year of business, I had made some mistakes with taxes and I didn't pay them correctly. And I got a tax bill for $50,000. And I remember during that time frame, there was a guy in this church who had, a decent amount of money, and he believed in me and he trusted me, and he gave me a significant amount of money to get over that period of time, which then I ended up paying him back. But again, just these moments when like, wow, if that person didn't reach out to me and be generous, like where would I have been without that? And so I've kept that in my brain. Like I want to be that guy.
That's awesome.
I want to be that guy that
That's
reaches
great.
out and helps people. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, that's where it's all born out of. And once you start to get into the habit of being generous, it snowballs like crazy because being generous is really not hard once you see the benefit of being generous. Like there's no downside to being generous with people. Like you're helping people. You feel great that you've helped people. You see what it does in their
Only
lives.
good usually comes from it.
Yeah. What the only thing that's bad out of it, is you lost the money that you gave up or the time that you gave up. But like God, I know this, like God doesn't give us talents, abilities, money, resources for us to just hoard it and use it. He's giving it to us because he says, I know you're going to take that and go use it the way I want you to use it. And, if you see it that way, which I really do, like I see it that way, I feel a very big responsibility and burden that, I have more than I ever could have imagined. Even today when I sit with like my accountant and go over it, it makes no sense to me. How is this like this? When these numbers start coming up, like that's somebody else. That can't be me. And so it just feels as soon as those conversations are over, I'm like, I always think to myself, so just tell me what to do with it. You want me to do something special with this?
Amen.
You want me to do something good with this? Like, I know that this is weird that I have all this. Like, I'm a nobody, and for some reason you have allowed this all to happen. So just tap me on the shoulder, tell me you want me to do it. I'm in. I'll do it every single time. Whatever generosity you want me to do, especially with money. And it makes you so much happier. If you have a tight grip on your money, and I've watched a lot of people with tight grips on their money, they're miserable. They're not kind. They're unhappy. They're suspicious of everybody.
Yeah.
That's not a way to live. The guy that I told you was the most very difficult boss at that first job at that car dealership. I remember towards the end of that, he bought a Ferrari, and he brought it over to show everybody because that's what he did. As soon as he bought something, like the whole appeal is for everyone to go, ooh, it's so great. So he brought it over, shiny, beautiful red Ferrari. And it's cool. I looked at it and I was like, wow. So he was sitting out there kind of chatting. And I said, man, you must be so happy. And he said, I'm the most miserable human being on the face of the planet.
He
That's what he
actually
said to
said
me.
that.
Yep.
Wow.
In a moment of honesty, which he normally was not honesty. And I said, really? I said, look at all this stuff that you have. And he said, none of it makes me happy. And then I think he woke up and he was like, go back to work. I don't want to talk about this. But I think that was a very striking conversation to me because I was like, wow, at that point in my life, he was the richest person I had ever met. And he had more than I could even comprehend. And he was miserable. And I think that's another thing God let me see. Like, just so you see, like when you just are all about this and this is all you care about, this is where you're going to end up. You're going to end up with all this shiny junk and you're going to be unhappy and miserable. And that stuck with me. It really stuck with me that the stuff I'm buying is, if I buy stuff, whether it be a house or a car or a thing, there's really not happiness that comes from that. And Pastor Roland preached a message, which is still in my brain, from like a month ago, where he talked about that.
Ecclesiastes as well.
Yeah. He talked about how, like, listen, God is what your eyes should be focused on. God is where you should be thankful. God is what should make you happy. And if that's right, if your eyes are on him, then the things that flow from him, the blessings, you enjoy them. Sure, they're good. Thank you. This is so great. I have a nice house. I have a nice car. But you're not looking to that stuff for the happiness. You're looking to God for the happiness, and you're just appreciating the things that he gives you. And I think that's a perfect way to put it. Like, appreciate whatever he gives you. But I've said to my wife a couple of times, do you think we would be just as happy if we lost 90% of what we have? And I think I would be. I really do. I don't think my happiness is tied up in what I have. I think I've struggled with my identity being tied up in being successful. It's something I've had to work through in the last probably 5, 6, 7 years to really, like, my value isn't my successes. My value is that God said I'm valuable. That's why I'm valuable, just because he deemed it so. It's not because of the things I do. But just having my happiness wrapped up in stuff has never been a challenge for me. It's never been a struggle for me.